So sadly I am back from the San Sebastian Film Festival where I was for 10 days last week. Really upset to be back home because I had the most incredible time while I was there. Totally fallen in love with the city and the festival itself, and more importantly I saw some incredible films during my time there. I have to apologise because I seem to have caught festival flu and I'm just getting over the last bits of that, so if I sound a bit rough that's why. So I just want to talk a little bit about the new directors section of the festival, which is basically the whole reason we were there. Let me elaborate a little. I went with an organisation called Nisimasa. They're a company that's dedicated to young European cinema and filmmakers. So me and my team were there to cover, as well as other films, mainly the new directors section, and give some coverage in the form of reviews and interviews with the directors to these young filmmakers who might not otherwise get such publicity. As it so happens, this section actually generated quite a lot of hype, perhaps even more so than some of the bigger films in the main competition, which is great for young cinema. So I'm just going to talk about a few of my favourites from this section, and also a few of the ones that really caused a stir in terms of audience reaction. First up, I need to talk about a film that ended up being one of my favourites of the entire festival. It's a Dutch film called Wolf. It actually won the Youth Award when it was announced a few days ago, which is awesome because I loved it. It's a crime thriller and it's shot entirely in black and white, which is super effective for the storyline. And it's a storyline that's been done before. You know, we've seen a young guy who's not on the straight and narrow. He wants to be, but he keeps falling back into a life of crime. It's been done before, loads of times before. And it's a good storyline, but what makes this one so special? Well, there is something special to this, and for me it's the characters. There's just so much depth to them, to the extent that I've never quite seen in a film like this. The lead character himself is just outstanding. He's a protagonist you can feel so many emotions for, and you're rooting for him, but he's essentially not a good guy, but his intentions are good. And again, it sounds cliche, but the director just goes to a new level in terms of his character depth, and it really brings the film together and brings out a completely different side of a crime thriller. I went to a late screening of this. I think it was at 10 p.m, and when you're at a film festival and you've seen several films already that day, and this is the last one of the day, it's quite easy to have the tendency to nod off towards the end of the night. And when I walked into the theatre, I thought, I'm at risk of doing that this time. But as soon as the film started, I was wide awake and totally immersed in this story, which for me is fantastic. I've just realised that I've lied and said that I was going to be talking just about the new directors section, when in fact these next two films I'm going to talk about weren't in that section at all. They were in the main competition, but they were still from new directors, so it does still count. Next up is a Mexican film called Club Sandwich. It won the Silver Shell, if I recall correctly, and rightly so because it was tons of fun, really well made, and it had a very giddy audience is all I can say. When I saw it, it was 9 o'clock in the morning, people were still a little bit tired, but the audience just giggled the entire way through, myself included. It was very funny. It's about a mother and her 16-year-old son who go on holiday together, and he meets a fellow teenage girl and sort of gets his first experience of love and sex and romance and things. So it's about that, and it's also about the mother's coming to terms with sort of losing her son, in essence. It's just a lovely film, and it really reminds you what it was like to be 16 again. And it's also a great example of a low-budget film. It's basically shot in one location. There's no frills to it, and it still manages to be exceptional. I mean, it won an award. It just shows you don't need a big budget to make a great film. Now on to the big winner. It won the Golden Shell, so it won the top prize, and it's a Venezuelan film called Bad Hair. It was actually the second film I saw there, so I was really off to a great start. It's about a little boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old, and he dreams of having straight hair like a pop star. He's got this really curly afro hair, and it makes him feel ugly, and he just wants to have nice straight hair. It's a very subtle film. There are a lot of underlying tensions and issues that it never sort of force feeds you, but sort of leaves you to interpret yourself. There's a lot of tension between the boy and his mother. She really hates his singing, she hates him wanting to have straight hair. She seems to have this problem with his femininity and is concerned that he's gay, so that's one running storyline. There's also the political background was going off in Venezuela. I mean, that's skimmed against it. Never, like I said, it's not a main storyline, but it's there. It's underlying the poverty of where they live and the violence and gang culture. This is all apparent in what actually is a very innocent storyline, the initial one. So there's a lot of depth to it. It's really, really well made. The characters were great. The little boy was adorable, and there's a lot of funny moments to it as well. But there's a lot to think about, and it was one of those where you left the theatre and you thought about it for a long time, which is the sign of quite a powerful film. And obviously the jury thought so as well. Now for my last film, I'm just going to go back to the new directors section and talk about one of the most controversial films that I saw of the week, and that is a Greek film called Luton. I was really looking forward to Luton when I went into it, and during watching it, I absolutely hated it. That sounds really harsh, but I was just wondering whether perhaps it went entirely over my head, because it was about an hour and a half film, and we were maybe 10 minutes from the end, and nothing had happened. Literally, there was no plot development, no character development, nothing had happened, and I could see lots of people left, and because when it's a new director that you don't know, you don't trust them, you're not going to hang around if it's not catching your eye. And I was definitely tempted, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to wait it out. And then 10 minutes before the end, all hell broke loose, and what followed was one of the most disturbing sequences I've ever seen. It was incredible, it was so well done, and then after seeing that, you could pick up clues from the rest of the film before then that sort of hinted at what was going on. When we came out of it, we couldn't stop talking about it. It generated so much discussion, and people either loved it, they hated it, and the more I talked about it, the more I liked it. This was a perfect example of one of those films that I perhaps didn't enjoy the experience of seeing, but I loved talking about it afterwards. And I love that about cinema, that it can provoke so many reactions, and it's not just a case of there in the moment. It can really last for a long time afterwards, and this was such a great example of that. I'm still not sure what I feel about it, but I'd really like to see it again. So I want to say that I think he's done his job quite well, you know. If he's making me want to see it for a second time, then he's done something right. So that's it for me and my new directors. I could literally talk forever about this wonderful festival, but I'd be here all night. So all I can say is that I hope these new directors get more attention and these films get a wider release, because they really deserve it. There's a great selection there, and I feel privileged to have been able to see them at their premieres. And all I can say is roll on next year.